Hello, friends. My name is Eric Cloward, and welcome to the Stoic Coffee Break. The Stoic Coffee Break is a weekly podcast where I take aspects of Stoicism and do my best to break them down to their most important points. I give my thoughts on Stoic philosophy, and I share my experiences, both my successes and my failures, and hope that you can learn something from them, all within the space of a coffee break. This week's episode is called The Strength to Feel, a Stoic's journey to emotional clarity and connection. Do you feel like you're truly in charge of your emotions? It's a question that can catch even the most reflective among us off guard. Often we feel as if our emotions are these wild, untamable forces that arise without our consent. We fear that by adopting something like Stoicism, it might strip away the intensity of those feelings, leaving us like empty shells. But what if getting a handle on our emotions could help us experience them more deeply rather than less? The only journey is the one within. Rainer Maria Rilke. So, growing up, I was a sensitive child. I wasn't just touched by what others said. I was moved, shaken, overwhelmed. A song could make me cry that others wouldn't even notice the melody. An offhand comment could ruin my day. I was swept away by emotions that I didn't know how to control. And I'd find myself sometimes lashing out, only to be left with regret and shame. I remember being sent to detention more than once for arguing with teachers, convinced that they were being unjust. And it's funny how convinced we can be that the world is wrong and we're right until we realize that we might be the ones that need to change. But what if your emotions were a compass and not a curse? So for years, I felt like my emotions were a burden, something to be endured rather than understood. Even as I grew older, I struggled to keep them in check. The irony is that in trying to suppress them, they only seemed to grow louder. And Stoicism was the framework that finally helped me to see clearly I'd been trying to control the wrong things. I was caught up in the turmoil of wanting others to like me, of craving approval, and bending myself into shapes that just didn't suit me, all in the hopes of trying to fit someone else's mold. Now, understanding what I can control changed everything. When I finally grasped that I could control my thoughts and reactions, but not the opinions of others, I experienced a kind of liberation. So Stoicism showed me that if I focus on living up to my own values, such as kindness and courage and integrity, then I don't have to be imprisoned by what others think. It's easier said than done, for sure. But once I stopped needing everyone's approval, I began to look inward and see that my own disapproval was the real problem. I wasn't the person I wanted to be, and I was afraid to face that. So as you all know, my podcast is my public therapy. One of the main reasons why I do this podcast is that it is incredibly therapeutic for me. Each week as I plan out an episode, I learn something more about myself and find better ways to manage my thinking and, as a result, my emotions. I'm sure that some people think that or would find sharing themselves and their struggles as openly as I do to be absolutely terrifying. But one of the things that I've learned by being vulnerable to you each week is that there's nothing to be ashamed of, and that by sharing these things, I'm being authentically myself. I want to be somebody that is open and unafraid and who knows himself. So over the past few weeks, I've been thinking a lot about how much more relaxed in my life and how much less anxiety I have. I also have been thinking about how my emotional lows are far fewer, but it seems like my emotional highs are a little bit lower as well. And this made me wonder if I've become somebody who's somewhat emotionally numb. It's not an easy question to answer, so I decided to dig in and see if I could make some sense of it, and see if there's anything I can do to make sure that in trying to be more in charge of my mind and my emotions, that I don't become an emotionless automaton. So let's talk about apatheia. What is apatheia? Well, apatheia is a state of equanimity. It's about letting emotions flow through you without getting trapped in them. It's a Greek word that comes from a, meaning without, and pathos, meaning suffering or passions. And in this case, passions means negative emotions such as anger, fear, anguish, and excessive joy. Now, this shouldn't be confused with the English word apathy, which means to be indifferent or impassive. Apatheia is about understanding how strong emotions are created and therefore how to manage them. And this isn't just a theory. It's something that we can see in action. Soldiers train to manage their fear and adrenaline in combat, and firefighters learn how to stay calm running into burning buildings. Their courage isn't the absence of fear, it's a fear that's under control. And as Epictetus wisely said, it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. So the next thing I want to talk about is beliefs shape our thoughts, and thoughts shape our emotions. Now, this connection is so important to understand, and it's often hidden beneath layers of unconscious assumptions. One belief that I had that shaped my life was that love had to be earned. I thought that if I could only be loved if I pleased other people and did what they wanted or made them happy. And this led me a path down a lot of self-doubt and insecurity because I was constantly bending myself to fit others' expectations. I didn't realize at the time, but I was putting my self-worth in the hands of everyone around me instead of taking responsibility for it myself. By dismantling the belief that love had to be earned, I learned to focus on being the person that I wanted to be, rather than who I thought others wanted me to be. And this realization has actually brought me a lot closer to people, and it's made me more open and allowed me to be vulnerable without fear of rejection. Paradoxically, it's only by letting go of the need for approval that we truly become free to connect with other people. Facing your fears and embracing who you are can feel like looking into a mirror that's been fogged up for years. So the first time I sat down and wrote down all the things that I didn't like about myself, I was bracing for a monster. But what I found were the same fears and flaws that I had compassion for in others. I realized that if I could love my friends despite their shortcomings, why couldn't I offer myself the same grace? And that's really the first step, accepting reality as it is, not running away from it, not wishing it were different, but looking at it straight in the eye and saying, I see you. This is the heart of Stoic apatheia. Not numbness, not indifference, but the ability to look at life storms and not be swept away by them. It's what gives us the strength to dig deeper and understand our emotions rather than being mastered by them. But I know what you're thinking. Doesn't that make Stoics robotic? Well, Stoicism often gets misunderstood as emotional suppression. But being rational about emotions isn't the same as rejecting them. It's about knowing when to listen to them and when to let them go. And this ability to stay calm doesn't shut us off from our emotions. It actually allows us to feel them more deeply. Think of it like a floodgate. When the gate is open, the water flows freely. But if it's shut, the pressure builds up behind it and it can burst with destructive force. The next idea I want to talk about is finding clarity through vulnerability. So the funny thing about being vulnerable is that it's like handing someone a key to a house you're not sure you even want to enter. But once you do, realize that the person you're unlocking the door for is yourself. And this lesson came to life for me in a conversation I had with a good friend of mine recently. We were discussing one of those thought experiments shared by Simon Sinek on a podcast, one of those what would you do scenarios that's so simple on the surface, but can leave you reeling with its implications. So Simon asked, imagine you're stuck in some dangerous third world prison and you have one phone call. Who would you call? Without hesitating, I told my friend that he was the person that I thought of. Not just because he's reliable and capable, but because I trust him. It was as if the words just fell out before I even had a chance to think. And then I realized something deeper. I was acknowledging that I'm willing to lean on someone. I told him how much he meant to me and how grateful I am to have him in my life. And it's a powerful thing, telling somebody how much you value them without needing to hear anything in return. And the best part? He didn't think I was weird for saying it. He didn't recoil or look for a way to deflect. Instead, he gratefully accepted it. He heard me. And there's a certain magic in that kind of exchange. A moment where you're truly seen and yet still feel comfortable being exactly who you are. And that's what happens when you stop needing approval and you start offering your true, unfiltered self. As Seneca once put it, but when you are looking at anyone as a friend, when you do not trust him as you trust yourself, you are making a grave mistake and have failed to grasp sufficiently the full force of true friendship. The next idea I want to talk about is embracing the depth of emotions without drowning. Now, what I realized in that moment is that When you let go of the need to manipulate your emotions to get a specific response from others, you gain the freedom to experience those emotions more profoundly. You're not trapped in the shallow waters of approval seeking. You're diving into the depths of real human connection. And the irony? When you stop chasing, the real connections come to you. You have the courage to feel even the darkest emotions. And by understanding the nature of emotions, Stoicism allows us to feel the full spectrum of human experiences, not just the highs of joy and excitement, but the lows of grief and despair. Because when we no longer fear emotions, we can invite them in. We can sit with sadness, mourn our losses, and come out stronger on the other side. In the aftermath of a deep personal loss, whether that's loss of a relationship, a job, or a loved one, it's tempting to shut down all those heavy emotions, to try and escape or numb ourselves. But Epictetus reminds us, people with a strong physical constitution can tolerate extremes of hot and cold. People of strong mental health can handle anger, grief, joy, and other emotions. So, one of the things that I like about Stoicism is that you're able to feel things without becoming overwhelmed. And I think what I've been trying to say throughout this podcast is that by getting your fear and anxiety under control, and by recognizing that most of those feelings are caused by your own thinking, you have more energy and capacity to feel the emotions more deeply. When you stop letting everyday frustrations sap your strength, you'll find yourself better equipped to handle the heartaches, the losses, and the moments that truly matter. The experience isn't about becoming numb. It's about gaining the resilience to sit with discomfort and to still feel the beauty of life and its complexity. It's the same principle that soldiers apply when training to manage their responses under fire. When you've trained to keep your cool, even when you're facing the harshest conditions, you don't lose yourself in your emotions. You control them. They no longer master you. They're your ally. Emotional mastery is not suppression. But does that mean that you can simply shut out all those darker emotions? I found that trying to suppress feelings only adds more anxiety in the long run. When you don't allow yourself to feel and process emotions, they don't just disappear. They linger beneath the surface and cause more suffering. This is why people turn to alcohol or drugs to cope. They're trying to numb something that can only be healed by facing it head on. So therapeutic methods such as cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, which are both rooted in Stoic principles, are tools designed to help people handle overcoming emotions by confronting them rather than avoiding them. They help us see that even the darkest emotions have a place, and when they are managed correctly, they can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. So, Stoicism isn't about rejecting emotions. It's about harnessing them to live more authentically, to be more open, and to connect more deeply with those around us. It allows you to stand firm in the place of life's storms, not because you're unfeeling, but because you're strong enough to feel everything without being destroyed by it. So while some may view Stoic calm as kind of an emotional detachment, the reality is that it allows us to feel and experience life more fully. Because we're no longer afraid of what we feel, we can embrace the full, rich spectrum of human experiences, bravely, vulnerably, and without apology. And that's the power of Stoicism. It gives us a framework to understand ourselves, accept our flaws, and harness our emotions to live more fully, not less. It's not about cutting ourselves off from the world, but about embracing it with open eyes and a steady heart. So yes, mastering emotions may mean that you're less reactive, but it also means that you have the capacity to feel the richness of life more fully without being overwhelmed. And that, I think, is a journey worth taking. And that's the end of this week's Stoic Coffee Break. As always, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and thanks for listening. Also, if you're not following me on social media, I would really appreciate it if you would. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at stoic.coffee. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok at Stoic Coffee, all one word. Thanks again for listening.